Los Angeles Rams head coach Sean McVay gets an extension. Roger Goodell speaks on the Deshaun Watson situation. Not looking good for Deshaun and the Browns, while ownership says maybe they're going to be okay with whatever the league decides. I have a sneaky suspicion they won't be. And some of the latest injury news, some big injuries, some players lost for the season. All the news going on in the NFL coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
You're listening to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show, your daily podcast on the National Football League, powered by the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock and Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Matt back at Latrobe, PA at Steelers training camp, but we're not talking Steelers today. We are talking about the Super Bowl champs, Los Angeles Rams. Let's start there. There's tons of stories around the league. We haven't really gotten into the latest news recently. We've been looking into all the divisions and players to watch in the preseason games. They're going to get going real soon here. We'll have some more thoughts on those preseason games to end the week on Friday's show. But on this Wednesday, an extension for Sean McVay, which is well-deserved, and you win a Super Bowl, you get a whole bunch of money, right?
Absolutely. He is 55-26 as the Rams head coach. And that's an excellent record, of course. But remember, he didn't take over a powerhouse. He built a powerhouse. So they did it in a very unorthodox manner, of course. They haven't made a first-round pick since Jared Goff. But they're the champs. Nothing else matters if you're the champs in terms of how you got there or how you're set up in the future. I still think they're a powerhouse this year. And how many more coaches would you put over McVay? 3, 4, especially when you factor in age?
Sean McVay hasn't made a first-round pick because he got hired.
That is correct. Right.
2016 was the year before, and the 8-8 BS with Jeff Fisher before that, right? Or the 7-9 BS.
Yeah, exactly.
So they were toiling in mediocrity until Sean McVay showed up, and he's absolutely injected some life into that organization, and they brought home a ring last year. There's still some questions about the arm health of their quarterback, which could be a problem going into the year, but still one of the favorites. And obviously a well-deserved. I haven't seen the actual numbers.
No, I haven't either.
It's just there's an extension announced, and usually when an extension's announced, the agent of said player or coach can't wait to put out the biggest number possible out there to show people what they did for their client. But I haven't seen that yet. So I just know that he's been extended, and it'll be a lot of money, probably the highest paid coach in the league, basically, right?
That's what I thought. Yeah,
we're seeing that now with coaches and players alike. If you're good enough to get that next deal, you're good enough to be paid at the top of the market for your position group or coaching group. Basically, is what we're seeing in the NFL these days.
Yeah, 100%. And I didn't realize he had not made a first-round pick. I find that funny. So was it July 9th or June 10th that was Jeff Fisher Day? 7-9, 6-10. I can't remember. I think it was 7-9. July 9th, I think.
July 9th.
Yeah. Very, very funny.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've seen with a lot of coaches is every offseason, a lot of the big name coaches, guys that are successful, Sean McVay, coaches and GMs, there's, meetings with networks that are trying to steal away talent. And so I think that's another thing that the teams have to do is they have to pay their coaches in a way that they don't want to go get a cushier job that can pay them as much or more money and a lot less work to work broadcasting games instead of coaching games.
Yeah, a good point. So it just so happens, and I don't think I'm divulging any secrets here, that Danny Smith is the Steelers special teams coach, and great guy. He we've had a beverage or two here and there, and the other night we were just sitting at the local watering hole with a bunch of people, and Danny was telling stories about Sean McVay. And I didn't know they knew each other, and I didn't know this extension was coming. But what Danny said was, hey, I'm a lot older than Sean. I've been doing this 20, 30 years longer than him. But he and I roomed together on the road when we were coaches with Washington and just raved about him as a human being, as a savant, all the things you hear through the media intelligence as an offensive mind, leader, energy. And of course they're friends, but he had nothing bad to say about him, totally unprovoked, just kind of talking McVay. So just reassured me that this is the creme de la creme of young coaches in the league right now.
Yeah, and I love there's that Lefko, Adam Lefko had an interview with Sean McVay on the field a couple of years ago now, and was asking him about plays that happened in the past, and he would go back 5-6 years. He went back to when McVay was head coach. Went back to Washington. It was the "you like that" game from when both McVay and Cousins were in Washington, and Shanahan, right? Was Shanahan? Well, Mike Shanahan.
Yep.
Yeah,
I think all the Shanahans were there. Yeah.
And the no, Kyle wasn't there because Kyle only had rookie year.
Okay.
Rookie RG3, rookie, I think.
And then did he go to Atlanta? I mean, obviously McVay and the Shanahans are very closely related.
Yeah, but anyway,
okay.
The moral of the story is he's asking McVay about these plays, and McVay remembers every single thing about the play. He remembers the play call. He remembers what the offense was lined up, the defense was lined up. Who did what. It is pretty amazing to see him rattle it off like that quickly and have that that insane recall of plays, a single play that happened in years past. It's pretty amazing.
So I hesitate to bring this up, but in my high school days and maybe into college, I recalled different parties or events by, oh yeah, we were drinking Michelob Light that night, or oh, that was the Heineken night, or remember we got Mickey's Big Mouth that night. And my buddies used to laugh at me like, you don't know anything, you can't remember what we did yesterday or what you had for breakfast, but 2 months ago when we were at the Pirate game, you're like, oh yeah, we drank IC Light that night, and you're right,
The Pete Bear Savant, like, yeah, I can remember.
Very similar to McVay, right?
What lubricated the evening for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love that. Hopefully, hopefully Matt Williamson gets the next big extension here with the Locked On podcast. 6-year deal.
I win the Super Bowl first.
That's true. Yeah. How about the comments from Roger Goodell about the Deshaun Watson situation? And basically what Goodell said is, going through Judge Robinson's ruling, the punishment didn't fit the crime, essentially. And I think that's what a lot of people are saying. And that there was, quote, multiple violations. And we've seen the evidence. She was very clear about the evidence. She reinforced the evidence, predatory behavior, egregious, all these things. And it's funny because when you read through Judge Robinson's ruling, and it sounds like, man, this is terrible. And there's enough evidence for a suspension, maybe not in the court of law to be convicted, and they, all that I know, but there's enough there to be like, yeah, this is definitely against the league's conduct policy, and there's, and it's egregious. And then it goes, and then it's like, and the suspension is 6 games. It's like, wait, 6 games. It sounded like it was going to be a lot worse. And that's, I think, where we're at with this is it's a new precedent that's going to be set. And I would be shocked at this point listening to Goodell, and he's not the one that's actually going to do this either. So he's trying to take himself away from making these decisions, but he still wants the decision to be the one he would have made. Is kind of what's going on with Roger Goodell in the league. But it sounds like it's going to be a year. Like it's going to be a year.
So it's like medical stuff. I don't like talking about lawyer and law stuff because I don't know much about it. I know about football. I know about podcasting. I don't know about, knees and Achilles and law stuff. I didn't go to law school, and I'm Watson to death. I mean, I'm sick of talking about this to no end, but we have to. And here's what I've kind of deciphered is listening to some people that have a law background and understand where Judge Sue Robinson was at. They kind of said her hands were sort of tied because people that understand the law say, well, if you committed 5 murders, I'm going to give you the same sentence as the last guy that gave 5 murders. Or, there's people use precedent in the law. That's a word I kept hearing. Where the NFL is kind of terrible about precedent. They've had a lot of bad boys over the years, but sometimes they get 2 games. Sometimes they get suspended for the year. Ridley gets a year for betting $1,500, but he didn't really hurt anybody. There's not a great record of, well, if you do this, you get this. So she was kind of hamstrung a little bit from what I understand, and just kind of went with the precedent of 6 games, but basically said there's more smoke here than I'm able to really convict him of. I'm not even sure that those are the right words. And then Roger steps in and basically says, well, I'm not going to oversee this hearing. Someone else is going to do it. But he says things like predatory behavior and egregious and, all these types of things. You can't tell me Roger does not have a massive influence on how this goes down. And therefore, the owners through Roger, and there's a new owner in Denver, by the way, congratulations to them. I think when it's all said and done, this will be a year, a minimum of 12.
I agree. I'm right there with you. And it's what the league wants. It's what everyone wants, except for Deshaun Watson and the Players Association, I think, too. And I think the Players Association has to fight for the player. And in some cases, maybe they don't even want to. But that's what they're there for. And they're going to do it. So we'll see if it goes to court beyond that as well. And so I don't think it's going to be over. And even when the next ruling happens, I don't know if it's still going to be over. And we'll see what happens with the Cleveland Browns and Deshaun Watson. The ownership transfer is official now, and Rob Walton, part of the Walton Penner Group, I believe it is now the new owners of the Denver Broncos. We'll see how that goes for Denver. Tons of news around the NFL, some injury news, and just in the last couple minutes since we've started recording that, we've got some good news actually about the Buccaneers center situation. Mekhi Becton, Jakeem Grant out for the year, and who's the starting quarterback with the Seattle Seahawks? All that and more coming up next. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find out all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. And it's amazing how many lines they already have for the NFL season. They've got weekly game lines all the way through week 16 already. Tons of prop bets, Super Bowl futures, coach of the year, player of the year, which coach is going to get fired first. You can find all of that at BetOnline. Find news and reviews of every league as well, not just the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, even golf, live in-game betting, which is always fun. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for not just sports wagering, but information as well and scores. They have you covered. So get over to the website today, betonline.net. Use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. Bet online, where the game starts. Thanks again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen. For your second listen, check out everything else going on the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Subscribe there because that is the home on YouTube of the Peacock and Williamson NFL show, as well as Locked On NFL and tons of other great content.
BP, two little things from the last segment I just wanted to carry over quickly.
Okay.
And we've talked about both these things before. First of all, the Denver ownership change. It's for gobs and gobs of money. To me, that's how I judge the health of the league, is what the franchises go for. And every time it's better than ever. So I think the health of the NFL is just fine. I think they're thriving.
Oh, absolutely. It was $4.5 billion, $4.65 billion, which is the most that any franchise has ever been purchased for. I mean, it's insane how valuable the NFL is, and business is absolutely good.
Yes, 100%.
And we're going to see the players start getting paid a lot more too, with the skyrocketing and recovering salary cap post pandemic, going up big next year, going up big the following year. So back to back years. So sign your players now before this new free agent period. That's what I would recommend. Exactly.
You're like Mahomes' contract that we used to lose our mind over is going to be chump change. Or should I give Terry McLaurin $20 million? Well, he's bought a franchise for $4.6 billion. I think you can manage to give your talent a little bit of bucks. Things are fine in the league right now. And we've talked this to death, but just back to the Watson Brown situation. I assume the Browns at this point are going to get Brissett ready for week 1 like crazy. That's got to be the goal, not giving Watson a ton of reps and really get Brissett ready. But if this comes out as a year, and we've brought this up, I want Jimmy then. If it's 8 games, 12 games, 10 games, I can't have Jimmy, Brissett, and Watson all in the room. That's a disaster for me. But if it's a whole season, I am calling about Jimmy, and I'm going to try to compete with a run game and a young defense. But the other thing is almost how you could hurt the Browns even more is if it were 12 games, because then they can't bump his contract another year. He's like a $45 or $55 million cap hit next year. But if he doesn't play this year, they can still finagle the cap next year that it doesn't hurt so bad. So if you really wanted to hurt the Browns, give them 12, not the whole season.
Yeah, it makes it more awkward for them to try to figure out what to do, and could end up just being more of a lost season than if they brought in
Exactly.
a better quarterback for just one more year, or at least more competition at quarterback for one more year. Although they they have to be saying this, but it sounds like they like Brissett enough to go with him for the year. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. They do have.
I just don't think they're a contender with Brissett. I think they are with Watson.
I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah.
So Robert Hainsey, who was the backup center, become the starting center after Ryan Jensen suffered a knee injury that would put him out for the year. And Hainsey had been looking good. They were happy with that situation with Hainsey as the starting center. He was carted off the field early in practice Wednesday, but now just about 10 minutes ago, Matt, Jeff Darlington on Twitter said that he was carted off due to bad cramps, and it's not looking like a leg injury. So that is good news. And so that
really good news.
Just rest, and who knows, maybe even if he misses preseason games and all the preseason games, it looks like, not something's going to put him out for week 1 or anything like that. And maybe it's just a one-day thing. So that is great news for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because seeing him get carted off the field, their starting center and backup center, they might have had to go shopping on the trade market to find somebody to plug in there at center if that was the case. And it's looking like good news for Robert Hainsey and the Bucs.
Yeah, I was prepared going into this because it just happened that he got carted off right before we hit record, to say, man, too much upheaval in the interior of the Bucs O-line. You have retirements, trades, draft picks, signings to the Bengals, injuries. Third string center sounds terrible. Backup center is a terrible thing as well. Maybe the best center in the league was out for the year, and Jensen. And I just kept thinking, I hope we don't have to have this conversation, but is this the year where the crap hits the fan for Brady and Gronk and the old guys? Can this formula it last yet again? Especially if the interior line isn't strong. So this is good news. So we can maybe have that conversation another day, or hopefully not.
Speaking of centers, Jason Kelce, 35-year-old center for the Philadelphia Eagles, has been so important to that offensive line for a long time. He had some elbow discomfort, tried to play through it, and it looks like he had a elbow surgery, a routine clean out is what they called it, and they still think it was the right way to go, and he'll be a quick recovery, could be back by week 1. They're still not exactly sure, but the Eagles were much more prepared for something like this than the Bucs were, because they just drafted a second-round center in Cam Jurgens, who, by all reports, has had a pretty good camp, aside from one viral clip where he got pushed back and couldn't anchor against Jordan Davis, which is expected. But as Jordan Davis said, he's like, I hate seeing that clip all the time because Cam Jurgens beating me on one-on-ones in camp too. It just wasn't, of the viral nature. So Cam Jurgens might end up being the starter sooner than we thought there with Philadelphia. But it doesn't look like something's going to hold out Kelce for very long.
Yeah, I don't think getting walked back by Davis is going to be an exclusive club in the next year or two.
It's already happened. I just saw other reports. There's group practices going on with, I believe it's the Packers and the Eagles, and Jordan Davis is doing the same to the other guys. So it's something he's going to do in his career, yes.
So this doesn't sound like a huge deal with Kelce, and I'm not going to overreact to it, but at his age, and then this offseason, he publicly said, I'm thinking about retirement, last minute type thing. I'll come back. I'm going to give it one more shot. I like this team, still playing well. But, you don't like seeing this for a guy in that situation. They did take a replacement, but that's for next year. They don't want to throw Jurgens into the mix. But as usual, the Eagles reinforce their offensive line, as they often do. And Dickerson could play center and then pinch too as well. So they'll be fine. I'm just worried about Kelce. What are we going to see from him this year? Is this going to be a bad year from Kelce? It could be,
Yeah, and the other thing is you have to be mentally prepared. If you're kind of halfway out and thinking, man, maybe I should retire, and we've seen this before. I think we kind of saw it last year with the Seahawks and Russell Wilson. It wasn't a great year for Wilson and the Seahawks because he's kind of out the door already.
Allen Robinson in Chicago, or a lot of those
exactly. That's another good one, which is why I'm so bullish. Even though it was a bad year for Robinson, it is a bad situation. I think he could go off in that Rams offense as long as Matthew Stafford's healthy. But someone like on the offensive line, you can't take reps off, and I think Kelce's wired in a certain way where he wouldn't be on the field if he wasn't ready to go. But you do start to worry about that kind of thing. 1-year deal, $14 million, he's getting paid. So nice little farewell tour for Kelce. Hopefully he does get healthy for that. But they do have a backup plan in Cam Jurgens if that's not the case. Another big injury on an offensive line in the NFL is Mekhi Becton. We'll get to his knee problem. We'll talk about the season ending early for Jakeem Grant as well in just a bit. I do want to remind everybody about the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast, though, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I love when you make Peacock and Williamson your first listen. Now, make Locked On Fantasy your second listen. Find the intellectual fantasy expert, Vinny Iyer, who's been bringing over 20 years of NFL expertise and a unique angle to give you the moves no one else has. Get ready for those fantasy drafts with Locked On Fantasy Football. And if you're in those dynasty leagues, check out Matt Williamson on the Locked On Dynasty podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Mekhi Becton. Is it a cracked kneecap? It sounds terrible. It's a right knee injury. Yeah, he fractured his right kneecap during Monday's practice at training camp. The team thinks it's going to be something that I think, what is the quote here from? Yeah, the quote is, "We love Mekhi. His ride is not over," Robert Saleh said. "His story is not over." So I don't know if that means long-term. He'll be back next year. I think that cracked kneecap sounds like he's not going to play this year, right? Like,
no, right.
And he's already not the left tackle anymore. Moved over to right tackle. George Fant is in there at left tackle. And he's just had such an up and down career. And you see the moments where it's like, wow, this guy could be really good in franchise tackle. And it just hasn't gone that way, and tons of injuries. And this is how it goes with some players. They just can't stay on the field, can't stay healthy. And you're hoping it's not the case, but it might be the case with Mekhi Becton, another big injury for him. And the Jets have put so many resources into the offensive line, and now they still have a big question mark at right tackle. Yeah.
And I find it ominous that Salah would even go down that road. I mean, I don't know what the question asked of him was, but, this is a young man that looked like to have as bright a future as any tackle in the league. Like Tristan Wirfs, type of prospect coming in after his rookie year, and nothing's gone right since, whether it's his doing or their doing, getting overweight, getting himself in the doghouse, injury, and then another one. Does one contribute to the other? If he had to take care of himself better this offseason, does he? I don't know. Frankly, I just feel bad for him that there's a bad turn of events here. I feel bad for the Jets that they thought they had their left tackle. They'd already moved him to the right side, as you said. There have been trade rumors. Like, nothing we've heard about Mekhi Becton in the last 18 months has been good. It's hard to overcome or come back from those things.
Absolutely. So Mekhi Becton, unfortunately, out for the year, broken kneecap. And Jakeem Grant tore his Achilles at practice Wednesday, and he's going to be done for the year now after signing a free agent contract with the Cleveland Browns. So the Browns, the Browns just keep getting a lot of bad news over the course of the last, some of it self-inflicted, but bad news for the Browns, just bad mojo heading into the year.
Yeah, not so good.
He wasn't going to be, Jakeem Grant wasn't going to be a big part of the offense or anything.
No, but I like him.
And, he can make some plays on offense and get, gadgeted in there. And he's a fun player. And I always like the root for the little guys that are, sort of playing above their weight in a way. The Steelers have another guy who's like the next Jakeem Grant, although I think he might be better than Jakeem Grant, especially on offense, in Calvin Austin. And I have heard some good things out of camp. And I know you said you look like he shot out of a cannon when running routes and carrying the ball out there. But I'm always rooting for the little guys.
I'm a Grant believer. I think he's one of the best returners in the last decade or so. Good after the catch. I mean, obviously you have Waddle and Tyreek, and he's not going to get in their way offensively, but he was always a guy I liked in that role of throw that bubble screen to Waddle, throw that bubble screen to Grant, and he gets 8 when most guys would have got 5, and use him sparingly here and there. Big play guy, special teamer, of course. But unfortunately, a lot of the news this time of year is going to be similar type things, and these coaches and roster builders have to plan accordingly. Got to go find. We invested in a returner. We thought we had that set up, and poof, it's gone.
Looks like Geno Smith is kind of, I don't know if he's winning the job or Drew Lock just never really took it from him because he was the incumbent backup that knew the offense and was going to take the first reps in spring practices and OTAs. That wouldn't be a surprise when they traded Russell Wilson and brought in Drew Lock in that trade. And Drew Lock has never leaped it. Like it's Geno Smith, and Geno Smith is still going to start. So I think Drew Lock is running out of time. And judging by reports from our guy Corbin Smith, when we talked to him about the Seattle Seahawks this offseason and all other reports coming out of Seattle, I don't think that Drew Lock is going to jump Geno Smith. Geno Smith, it's announced, will start the first preseason game, and it looks like Geno Smith is going to roll out there as the starter. He's a veteran quarterback. We've talked a lot about how it doesn't look good on paper for the Seattle Seahawks. Could there potentially are we selling Geno Smith short is my question, I guess.
I don't think he's terrible. I mean, if we were to do Sando quarterback tiers or quarterback rankings, I bet I'd have Geno 42nd, like top third of true backups. He didn't play terrible in a short stretch last year, but like Brissett, after a while, the tape just exposes the weaknesses that he's never been able to overcome in his career. That he's limited. He has some good drives, some good games, but when it's a bigger sample size, he comes back to earth, and every defense knows what those weaknesses are, whatever they might be. This is recency bias by me, but I don't remember on August 10th of any year looking at a team and saying they're worse at quarterback than Seattle is right now. I mean, usually at least there's a young guy that you have hope for, or Ryan Fitzpatrick that at least has been around the league, or somebody that you could say, well, he might be good enough. I don't see that at all in Seattle. Side note, their preseason game happens to be here in Pittsburgh on Saturday night. I'll be there. And then I always wanted to mention this to you. One of my least favorite responsibilities with the Steelers all year is I guess I've done this for like 10 years. I am the post-game preseason game radio host. 2 hours of getting calls from John from Blawnox telling me that the third string running back's better than Najee, or why isn't Kenny from Pitt playing every down? And then you leave the stadium at like 2 a.m. It's brutal, dude. Three times a year.
I can see how that would be brutal, but you have to wear it as a badge of honor, Matt, because they trust you to know the guy 53 through 90 on the roster.
Right.
It's important, and that's a talent you have. You have a talent of knowing the last man on the roster and what cheap domestic beers you drink at a party.
Right.
Those are things you can't teach. All right, Matt. So you should wear that as a badge of honor. I just looked at the Mike Sando tiers, by the way, where every year for The Athletic, he interviews coaches and executives in the league, and they rank quarterbacks by tier. So actually, it's funny because none of the Seattle Seahawks quarterbacks rank among the top 32 quarterbacks in the NFL.
Right.
When probably not too much of a surprise. They're close. So, and they're actually back to back. So Drew Lock was ranked 34. Geno Smith was ranked 35. And Drew Lock was the last player in tier 4. Geno Smith, the top player in tier 5. So basically tier 5 this is a backup quarterback. Tier 4 is you probably don't want this guy starting 17 games, but maybe he's a dirty starter in some circumstances, or he just hasn't played enough that you believe in him. All the second year quarterbacks are in this 4th tier. So Mitch Trubisky's right above him at number 33. But the Steelers have a first-round quarterback that they're hopeful for in the future. Right. And the Seahawks don't have that. So, yeah, that paints the picture. And Jimmy Garoppolo is ranked 16 on this list. And, he's a clear tier or 2 above these guys. And so I wonder if that might end up being their starting quarterback. And I wonder if some other teams around the league, because we've never seen this much talent in the NFL at quarterback. There's a ton of quarterbacks that you could argue starting caliber. So there's almost no excuse for not having a quarterback that at least has future value or current value, and the Seahawks have needed.
Right. I 100% agree that it's at least the Steelers, the Panthers, the Falcons have hope of, a young guy or something along those lines, So, I mean, I just look at this and think, has this really been the plan all along? I mean, do they think this is the plan, that is that truly a tank and we're going to end up with a top 5 pick and get one of these quarterbacks, and that's really the plan? Or are they going to wait everybody out and end up with Jimmy? Jimmy's come up now twice in this conversation, and he often does when we talk on here. But at this point, again, it's August 10th. Whoever Jimmy ends up with, he's going to really have to swim upstream to get ready for game 1 or even, game 4 or 5 or whatever.
Luckily for Jimmy, half the teams in the league now are like Shanahan, McVay, tree coaches.
True.
So the like if he goes to Cleveland, Kubiak, Shanahan, tree coach there, Stefanski, terminology should probably not be that difficult. Now, if he goes to, and he's worked in the Patriots scheme as well, which is in a lot of places. So there are some teams that it might be easier than others for Jimmy G, but if he goes to a foreign system he's never known, yeah, that's hard. He needs to be in camp right now, getting ready to play at least one preseason half or quarter of football to get ready for the year. So that is going to be tough for any team if they wanted to bring in someone like Jimmy Garoppolo. And I wonder if it doesn't seem like right now any team is really wanting to do that. So it's fascinating. But we saw how someone could tear their Achilles or break their right kneecap. And Jameis Winston went down with an ankle. It looks like a pretty minor, turned ankle. I haven't seen the exact prognosis, but they're not super worried about it. But there could be an injury. And all of a sudden, now there's
games coming up. They haven't even played games yet.
Right.
Someone's going to get hit and hurt this weekend, and so there'll be a market for them. I bring that up because I've really been near Steeler camp and watching Pickett and Trubisky. They've looked a little lost, and they get better and better and better. But you just notice even little things like I can throw this ball high to George Pickens, but I can't to Deontay or whatever. Like just knowing your receivers and. Boy, Calvin Austin's even faster than I thought. I can put a lot of air under this thing and just let him separate. Like those things take a little time, just knowing who you're throwing to and their tendencies and likes and dislikes.
Yeah, and I think about what the Browns said about their quarterback situation and needing an adult in the room, according to reports. And there's something to be said about just being a pro, from Tuesday to Saturday. And what you're doing at the line of scrimmage pre-snap. You might get a team into the right play, and it might be a run play. So it's hard when you watch tape and you see a quarterback and you wonder why some of these, journeyman backup quarterbacks keep getting jobs and teams want them around because there's something they bring that's valuable to your team. And you can trust that they're going to get you into the right play, that they know what's going on, that they can break a huddle, that the team will rally behind them, even if they're an imperfect quarterback and an imperfect passer. And so when you and I are, watching games on Sunday or rewatching film later, just seeing what throws they make and their physical arm talent doesn't tell the whole story about a quarterback. And I think that's really the big thing that is glaring about quarterbacks that don't play well in the NFL that teams can't win with is it's not about the arm connected to their shoulder. It's about the head connected to their neck.
Very well said. And it's not an accident that Reich, Garrett, Peterson, Leftwich all go on to be very successful coaches, or Josh McCown or Matt Schaub are in the league 5 years longer than they can play. And even if you're paying that guy $4, $5, $6 million a year, the fact that if that guy can be your quarterback coach / offensive coordinator's translator to young quarterback, the 50-year-old to 22-year-old, dictionary, translator, that's gold. You don't want him seeing the field. You don't want Matt Schaub out there. He can't throw. He couldn't throw 5 years ago. But if he can teach the next guy to be a star, how to be a professional adult in the room, that's gold.
Right. And if he's forced into action, even if he's imperfect, can he run your offense? Can he get you in and out of the huddle?
Absolutely can. Right.
A total disaster. So yeah, it's pretty important. All right, good stuff. The Seattle Seahawks. I don't feel terrible about them being doomed this year as it seems, but I have a feeling, they're not going to be as bad. And I always think back to the sample size of the NFL and, watching the Major League Baseball season, and there's 10 times more games in Major League Baseball. The very worst teams win 40% of their games. The very best teams win 60% of their games. That's not a big gap, right? In the NFL, small sample, if you went back and look at 16, 17 games in an NFL season, there might be a team that rattles off 15 wins. There might be a team that loses 14. But over the long haul, now you can't have a 160-game NFL season because the players would be dead. But you just know it's a small sample league, and I think the bad teams are better than we realize in a lot of cases, and the best teams are worse than they realize. If you kept playing games over and over, if you replayed the playoffs from last year, it'd be a different outcome every single time.
Oh, yeah.
Small sample nature of the NFL, which is why you can't screw up because you only get one shot each week.
We need to wrap this up, but that brings me to one thing I've been meaning to bring up a lot. Is everyone knows I'm a big fan of Football Outsiders and what they do, and their almanac I couldn't recommend anymore. But I was listening to Aaron Schatz the other day, the founder of Football Outsiders, and he said, I've never had a year where we do our projections, our projected win totals. 9.7 wins, 6.4 wins, whatever. He said this year, since the beginning of Football Outsiders, everyone is close and bundled up more than they've been any other season. Whoever the highest win total isn't at 13, it's at like 10. Whoever the lowest one, it's not at 2, it's at like 7. And he realizes not everyone's going to win 7, 8, 9, 10 games. Someone's going to win 14, and bad things happen. But he said just the way that they do the metric and their math has really bunched the league together more than than it ever has, and that adds up to me.
Yeah, it feels that way for me as well. And part of it might
be as good as the Rams were. I didn't look at them as they're the powerhouse that we've never seen before. They were good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same with the Bengals.
Yeah. Fantastic stuff. Matt and I back tomorrow. We're going to start previewing the week. Actually, we will have a game to maybe break down. And I know it's the bane of your existence, Matt, but I don't think we're going to be talking about fourth quarter preseason week 1 football. Well, there might be some things interesting in the first half to talk about for those Thursday games on Friday's show, and the things we'll be looking for the Friday, Saturday, Sunday slate of games. When we come back Monday, we'll be able to break down the important things that did happen over the weekend. And there will be some important things that happened, even though we are into preseason football. But we are into football, and I'm excited for it. Matt and I will take you through it all. And back tomorrow, right here, Peacock and Williamson.